What if you could see the potential impact of your business decisions before you ever make them? Intersect Labs gives you the next best thing. So once you've trained a model, the simulator enables you to run what-if scenarios and understand the impact of business factors on your target outcome. Let's go with a practical example. Say you've trained a model to predict which users might churn from a European market for an online banking product. You use these predictions to predict which of your current customers are at a high risk of churning, and then trying to engage them. But as a business decision maker, you want to think more broadly. You want to run what-if scenarios. This is where the simulator comes in. I'll create a new simulation, and I want to start out by looking at my demographics of age and the churn risk associated. When the simulator opens, you'll see two things. First, on the left, you'll see your average user. The average balance, number of products they have, their estimated salary, most common gender, most common geography. And on the right, you'll see an XY plot charting the predicted churn risk for that user across age ranges from the smallest age, 18, all the way up to 80s and 90s. Right away, this predictive model has given us a pretty important insight, which is for young users up to age 34, they have a very low constant churn risk. But that risk of leaving the product spikes up proportionate with age, all the way up to about age 53, levels out, and then drops down again. But we want to dig even deeper. We're looking at the typical user, one who's not a very active member. Let's simulate what happens if we look at the users that look the same but were much more active on our product. So I'll change it to active users. I'll create a new scenario. I'll call this active users, and I'll run the scenario. What I'm looking at now are two graphs. The purple one above is the default most typical user. The blue user below is the more active user. As you can see, unsurprising, more active users have a much lower churn risk across all of the age groups. But I'm starting to see something interesting, which is that while having more active users decreased the risk a bit for the younger generation, for the older generation, there were huge drops. There's this age range between about 50 and about 56 that doesn't drop too much and is our most likely to churn. What if there was a leverage point to try to lower that churn risk? For the purpose of this demo, I've already explored a factor called tenure, which has to do with how long customers are spending on the product. If I hike it up to its maximum, I run a new scenario called max tenure active users, I see a fascinating new development. Looking closely, max tenure active users look similar in terms of churn risk to just plain active users with a more typical tenure. But if I zoom in specifically to that problem demographic, the demographic that lands around the early 50s, I've noticed that there's a disproportionately positive effect of having a larger tenure. This has exposed to me a high leverage point for maybe increasing users' tenure to lower the risk of churning and keep them on the product. Let's say, though, we're thinking about planning a new marketing campaign and sending it out into a new demographic, say Germany. We want to jump in and understand who is going to be likely to use our product and remain on it. I'll name my simulation Launching in Germany, and again put age in the x-axis to view the demographics. Again, we begin with our most average, typical user. Let's start looking at the geography of Germany and German women specifically. I'll create a new scenario. Right off the bat, I see some red flags. Compared to our typical demographic in France, German women are at a much higher churn risk across the board, particularly for the older age demographic. Let's compare that to men in Germany. Here we see something interesting. While in the older age ranges, German men and women churn at very, very high rates, as you get younger, we see a split. German men tend to churn much less than German women. This is a fascinating insight to dig into deeper outside of data with our marketing team, with our research team. But it's also an exploration that I can continue to explore. For example, I could go in and look and say, okay, among these German men, for those who have very, very high credit scores, what are we looking at now? Looking closely, we found something surprising. It turns out having a higher credit score seems to have little to no effect on the risk of churn. This is just one example. With the simulator, you're able to take historical data and stop speculating about the future, but actually run clear experiments about what is most likely to happen and then make the most informed decision. Ready to simulate the future with your data? Click the link to schedule a call with us, learn more at intersectlabs.io, and follow us on Twitter at IntersectLabsHQ.